This is Glambition Radio, episode number 259 with Dana Perino, former White House press secretary and Fox News anchor.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Glambition Radio.
Glambition Radio.
Glambition Radio.
Glambition Radio.
Glambition Radio.
Glambition Radio.
Welcome to Glambition Radio. I am your host, Allie Brown. I'm an entrepreneur, mentor, investor, and founder of The Trust, the modern premier network for 7- and 8-figure women leaders. I love thinking big, doing different, and exploring ideas that disrupt the status quo, especially when it comes to women, because we are creating the new models for leadership, business success, making money, and changing the world. And hey, we're doing it with style. So let's go. Hello from Arizona. I am recording this on the go, and I am actually in town, but I'm at a hotel down the street. My kids and husband actually understand this now. There'll be these points, every few months I'll be like, babe, I gotta just grab a stack of books, grab my projects and a laptop, take a bag and check in somewhere for even just 1 or 2 nights. I get so much done. I'm so focused. I get through more in 2 days than I could in a few weeks, and it's so worth it. So moms, even if it's just, going to the coffee shop for the day, change of environment is so, so critical, especially when you're feeling so fired up. And I am right now. You can probably hear it. The energy in the air right now is so decisive. It's so supportive. It's so fiery. And if you're not feeling that right now, go back and listen to my last episode that I just recorded. The Doors Are Opening. That's the title, because it's about the energies. It's also about doors opening for my iconic event very shortly. So if you're not on the priority notification list, go to iconicwithallybrown.com, okay? We're going to be releasing seats very soon, and that list is the only place that we announce them first, okay? So please go there. And oh my gosh, so Dana Perino, you know her. She is former White House press secretary. She's a familiar face on Fox News. And she had a story I never knew until this interview that we did. And I could not get off the phone with her. What a discussion we had. I didn't know about her humble beginnings in Wyoming. I didn't know all these stories about her career and these tough decisions that she made. And her new book is fantastic. It's called Everything Will Be Okay: Life Lessons for Young Women from a Former Young Woman. I'll tell you, it's jam-packed with great advice. I couldn't put it down, and I can't really say I'm a young woman anymore. I'm about to turn the big 50 in August. But such a great discussion. Make sure you listen all the way through the end, because my personal favorite, and I'm sorry, it's her meeting her husband and that story, because I can so relate. So have a great time listening to this. Be ready to take some notes. And don't forget to go to iconicwithallybrown.com and get on that priority list so you can be the first to know all the details when we have them and when the seats are open for registration. Okay, so enjoy this great interview with Dana Perino. Dana Perino, where is Dana Perino today? What is your life like?
I am in my Manhattan office. We're in Midtown, where a lot of the businesses are not back in the office yet, but Fox News has been here. And so I'm right here at Rockefeller Center.
So you're actually there with real people. I didn't know what was going on in New York.
Yeah. We're here. I was home for a while. We set up a little guest studio a studio in the guest bedroom, and we did that for a few months. But we found a way to do it safely here. We get tested twice a week.
Ugh.
Many of us are vaccinated, and to me, I'm not going to say it feels like normal, but in a way, we haven't really experienced as much as what so many people are going through in the country, which, there's working from home and then there's living at work.
Right.
Which is what a lot of people are doing.
Right. I'm just sorry about the thing up your nose twice a week. Otherwise, it all sounds pretty good. So, that's good to know. It's good to know New York's kind of coming back. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, and the governor and mayor, who hate each other,
mm-hmm.
They are always trying to one-up each other. So it's like, I'm closing down. No, I'm closing down. Well, now they're in a fight to who can reopen faster. So
good.
The good news is, I believe, on May 19th, Broadway can open. Now, that doesn't mean all the shows come back all at once, but that does mean that the tourists will start to come back. The restaurants which have been either closed or have worked so hard to fight to stay open, they're going to get to reopen. And I just think that I don't think it'll be too hard for all of us to get back to normal.
That's good. I hope so. I'm gonna hold that intention, and that segues nicely into the title of your book, that everything will be okay. When I saw that, I'm like, but will it really? I'm sorry to say that. Tell me about. Well, first of all, I just need to say, and I started gushing a bit before we came on, but I have known who you are obviously for a long time. And as, a woman, just seeing someone like you on TV and speaking so well. And I learned more about your background and your focus on communications, which is always my thing. I have a bachelor in comm, and I never had any idea how helpful that would be in the rest of my life. I always just kind of had my eye on you, and then I kind of lost touch with where you're at. And suddenly, I realized what you've been doing. And by the way, if you wrote a book on how to look like you look, we'd all buy that too. You look even better now than you did like in 2006. I don't know what you're doing, but tell me offline. Tell me offline.
That is for sure. I didn't have any time for hair and makeup in 2006, and hair professionals helped take care of me. That's for sure.
Oh my gosh! So maybe I'm jumping around, but why don't we start a bit about who is Dana Perino? Who are you really? We know you through these positions, right, and where you've been featured. But let's talk about who you are.
Gosh, that's a great question. This is a little bit like therapy, Ellie, because I just looked over in my office where I have a stack of my books, and I'm like, I think that I really, really understood who I was as I finished writing the book.
This one?
Yeah, I think so. I think it takes a little bit of time, and you and I are the same age, and you're doing so much to give back to the younger generation who will listen to all of your podcasts with all of this great advice. And when we were starting out, there was nothing like this.
Right.
For all of us. And I wrote about, and I know you've talked about, that quarter life crisis. And I really think that is following people well into their 30s now, and maybe even beyond. And there's just a huge amount of anxiety. And so I was born in Wyoming, and I spent a lot of my formative years on a cattle ranch, but also had, I guess you could call it, I would say, cosmopolitan experience. I don't know if Denver in the 80s and 90s would qualify as cosmopolitan, but for me, that was the big city.
Bright lights, big city.
Yeah, exactly. And I went to college on a speech team scholarship. And I think when I look back, I would say joining the speech team in high school was probably the most valuable thing that I did in terms of my future skills. Also, I might mention this, Allie. When I was in third grade, my dad had this tradition he started with me where I had to read the Rocky Mountain News and the Denver Post before he got home from work and be prepared to discuss it before dinner. Well, to discuss two articles that I had picked out.
Oh, how old were you?
8 or 9.
Wow.
In the third grade. And that started a lifelong love of news. And one of the great things is I feel that if I wasn't paid to keep track of the news and to talk about the news and deliver the news, I would still be reading all of this content anyway. So that I found a way to get to this point in my career is perfect for me. But I was one of those people that for a long time, if you asked me what did I want to do when I grew up, I would tell you I wanted to be a local news anchor for a big city. And then I started down that path, the traditional path is you work in local news and you bounce around for many years making no money. And the truth, I just wasn't cut out for me. And I realized it when I was in graduate school, called my dad, and thankfully he said, well, I had taken out my own student loan because my parents said that graduate school was a decision I was making and I had to make the investment. And I'm glad I did that because it doesn't make a difference if you are paying for it yourself. Anyway, I ended up going to Washington, D.C., and I worked on Capitol Hill. Eventually, then I came back to Washington after a little hiatus and meeting my husband on an airplane and living in San Diego. I came back to the Capitol right after 9/11, and I joined the Justice Department and then went to the White House from there. And so now I'm the co-anchor of America's Newsroom, and I'm a co-host on The Five, and I do election coverage here at Fox News Channel. And I look back and I think all of those career advancements were nothing that I planned, but they were all things that I was ready for. And that's why when I say everything will be okay, that's not a passive thing, though. I do believe everything will be okay, but it takes a hell of a lot of work and discipline to get to that point.
Yeah.
And so that's what I try to advise.
There's a story in your book, and I think it's near the beginning, that you talk about, you were giving advice to a young woman on a decision she had to make. There was something she felt was a little incongruent with integrity and her work. And you were like, well, you can't do it. You can't do it. And she said, well, that's easy for you to say. You're Dana Perino. And your response just stuck with me. And you said, how did you think I became Dana Perino? And that really stayed with me because I get people asking me, those people make just fun or flippant comments like that too. Oh yeah, well, you're Allie Brown. But now I'm going to put that back on them because it's so true though. It was those moments of doing the uncomfortable thing, but the right thing that I think were so pivotal for me looking back and honoring how I felt about things. And I wanted to just make sure I got that in right away because I really feel that's a big part of who you are as well.
I'm so glad you asked about that because there's actually a very interesting side story to that story that I had. So that's how I start the book. That's the introduction of the book. But originally in the draft, it was just within a different chapter. And there were two guys that were involved in helping edit the book, which I'm grateful for their help. And you don't always have to take all their advice.
Right.
But both recommended taking that out of the book.
Ooh.
Because they felt it sounded too arrogant and that it wasn't in keeping with the other tone and tenor of the book.
Oh my God.
So I took that on board and I was like, oh, wow, arrogant. I'm like, I never want to be called arrogant. That's like the worst thing you can be called in Wyoming. So I basically slept on it and I woke up the next morning and I said, bullshit. That's the whole reason I wrote this book is that story. So I put it in an intro instead. I'm sorry, I just cursed on your air.
Oh, we've said plenty worse. It's okay.
Okay. So I made that the front story. And the reason is that I wanted to say your integrity is your most valuable asset. And you are in charge of protecting it. Nobody else can do that for you.
See, that grabbed me. When I read that, I'm like, I'm in. I'm reading this thing. It's on.
Yeah. And I remember when Scott Adams, who is a wonderful commentator and of course, the originator of the Dilbert cartoon, he read that and he said, not to sound arrogant, but he said that was the best intro of any book he'd ever seen.
Wow.
And I took that as a great compliment, but it really has stuck with people because you think you want to be like me one day? Okay, great. To your point, Allie, I went through all sorts of things. Like I'm a firstborn daughter. Wait, let me ask you, what is your birth order?
First.
Okay. So you and I probably have a lot of the same characteristics, right? Pleaser, don't ever want to disappoint anybody, somewhat perfectionist, like really ambitious, but worry a lot. And I feel like I worried my 20s away and there's no need to. And also now, if you think about where you and I started, but I think about my mom, when she read this book, she said there was no career guidance for women at that time. And now look at all that we've accomplished. So if you're born in America and are an educated woman and look at all of these advancements, like really all you have to decide is how hard do you want to work?
Right. Right. And it's actually advice that you don't see many places. I hate to say that, it's instant gratification now. And I was talking about this on another show that I got out of college in 93 and then lived in Boston for a bit and then lived in New York as well. And I am so glad that their online world hadn't taken off that much. And I'm so glad that there was no social media. I had nothing to compare myself to. All I knew to do was work. All I needed to do was figure it out. And all I could listen to was myself. And looking back, I wish I had mentors. I wish I had people around me. I remember the only book I remember picking up that was really life-changing was, do you remember Kate White? She did Gutsy Girls, the Gutsy Girls book. We had her on. She was a former editor-in-chief of Cosmo. And, I remember it was so few and far between to see books written for women and like how to go for it. And I love the stories in your book because you really talked about, this isn't like the Instagram generation. Like this is, and the women today who really want to take their career seriously need to think this way. You can't think like, in this fluffy way that I see as being, really spread around right now.
Well, the other thing is that because women are succeeding more than ever before, that, okay, well, now you've got the seat at the table. Now you're in leadership. Now you're the manager. Now it's up to you. And I love watching some of these young women, especially here around Fox. I see the growth in their careers. And I will tell you, on America's Newsroom, the top 5 positions across those 2 hours are all women. And, 10 years ago, I don't know, that wouldn't have been the case, but now we don't even think about it. Or think of the White House press secretary job. I was the second woman to have that job, but now it's all women that have had that in the last.
It's pretty common.
5, right? So that glass ceiling has been firmly shattered in a great way. So now the question is, okay, how can you then keep succeeding? And I think that this year of COVID has shown that this younger generation is quite resilient, and they might not have even realized that they were, right? Like, what was the test before then? And they have been tested. Caitlin Flanagan wrote a great piece in which she said, history has found you. For our generation, I would say like a real pivotal point was the 9/11 terrorist attacks. It certainly changed the trajectory of my career. For this generation, it will be this pandemic.
That's so interesting to think about that. It's kind of a big, heavy moment. Like, the history has found you. I love that. And what will you do with it? Who do you become? Who do you become because of it? Right? That's the question. And it's a decision who we become because of it. So Dana, why this book now though? And did you think actually, was there ever a moment like when, because I know you a book like this, you're working on like 2 years ahead, right? And you're planning the publishing date and all that. Was there ever a moment you're like, geez, is this the right time for this to come out? Or was it the perfect time?
Well, I think, okay. When I was writing the book in an election year, and in particular, that election year, with 2 shows and a weekly hit on Tucker, I have to say, what in the heck was I thinking that this was a good time to write this book? Because I had no time during the week. So I would write all day long, Saturday and Sunday. And then I'm editing in the middle of the presidential debates. I have, you have deadlines that you have to meet. And I thought, this is crazy. What was I thinking? But then when the book came out on March 9th, that was about a year to the day when the pandemic was declared by President Trump. And that's when people started shutting down their businesses and working from home. And I realized that with especially the title, Everything Will Be Okay, that it just ended up being the right book at the right time. And the book had been building in me for a while. In my first book, and the good news is, I had 1 chapter of all my mentoring advice in one place. But that was a chapter I would hear about the most. And people would ask me, when are you going to write another? And I thought, I don't really have anything more to say. And then over the years, I realized, I have a lot to say. I have a group called Minute Mentoring, when we do these events that are like speed dating, but mentoring instead of romance. And then people come in my office constantly. I could just basically do a mentoring job. I could be busy all day long with advice. And so I started realizing I keep giving the same advice over and over, and that enough time had passed that I felt like I wanted to do this. But for me, I wanted to go beyond just like the day-to-day mentoring advice. I wanted to talk about going to that next level where you become the leader or the manager or the woman that decides that she is ready to start her own business. And also at the same time, I focus in this book, the last chapter, on serenity and how to set your life up so that you can have more of those moments, which I think are God's gift to us.
Yeah. Yeah. When I saw that chapter, it seemed a little, we only see you as this high performer, right? Like we see the Dana Perino. Picturing you serene. I don't know what that would look like. What is that look? I mean, you're always serene. You got a calm, cool air to you, but I was curious about that. Like why was that important to have in there for you?
Well, I think that because, as I said, I was a worrier and had anxiety, and everybody has anxiety. I'm not saying that I had a disorder. I know people definitely have some severe problems with it, but I had enough that I think that it held me back. And I think when I think of serene, for me, I think of serenity as those moments that are just glimpses when you feel you're at the right place at the right time. And there's an equilibrium that's just so beautiful. And you want to like find those places. And meditation for me has been helpful. One of the things I've loved during the pandemic was the Peloton app. And I have 5 or 10 minutes, 20 minutes sometimes of a guided meditation in which can help me get to those places. And also, I think realizing that I didn't have to be constantly on the lookout for what was next. This is the first time in my life I'm not worried about what's next for me career-wise. And I also have to say, though, Allie, had, I would say, kind of a lot of financial anxiety, like worried that I wouldn't have enough money to pay bills. And I always did pay my bills, but I had this anxiety about it. And I think once I reached a point where I didn't have to worry about finances, that certainly took a lot off of me as well. So I try to provide some advice in the book as well for anybody dealing with that kind of concern.
Right. So I think meditating, wow. Yeah. That's awesome. I just love learning things about people that I didn't know about them. So tell us, I want to ask you, I want to take a totally different direction. So before I do that, tell us more about the book and where we can get the book. And so I don't forget that.
Oh, sure. Well, it's, I love independent bookstores. So if you have one in your neighborhood, I think that's good. I've been really gratified that it's been a big graduation gift for people. And a lot of moms and dads, aunts and uncles, grandmothers and grandfathers are buying it for young women because sometimes young people will hear advice differently depending on who says it. So your dad can give you advice all day long, but then, Allie Brown says it, and like, I'm going to do that. And you're like, hey, I just said that. But I think that matters. I also had a chance to go and see President Bush at the Bush Center for a book event that he hosted for me. And It was really gratifying because there's a lot of stories in there about my time getting the job as White House press secretary, trials and tribulations, what it was like to develop a loyalty and a trust with the commander in chief. And now that I can call him a friend, of course, that's very fulfilling as well. And I'm just really pleased with how it turned out. I think that my favorite compliment I've had about the book is from a few young women who have said they feel like when they read it, it was written specifically for them. And that's why I knew that, they'll say, how did you know that I was worried about this or that? I'm like, because you're not alone. And I'm not saying even that just because I had those worries, Allie, it's just like all of us as you grow up through your careers, you just figure things out. And you're not, I think that's also a really important thing. You're not alone in your worries and concerns. Not at all. And the more you talk about them, the less power they have over you.
Yeah. So can you just pick up the phone and call W?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't bother him very much, but yes, I can.
Was there a moment that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm working for the president? When you got to that point where did you just look over sometimes and be like, oh my gosh, how did I get here?
Yes, of course. And that's called imposter syndrome.
Right.
I'm hearing a lot more of that now, but that's like when one time I was standing at the White House briefing room and taking questions, and like a little side thought comes up in my brain, like a little thought bubble that says, why would they ask you this? How would you know what's going on in terms of in the Punjab region? And the truth was like, because I actually do know. All of us go through that a little bit because we're just human. And I have just a huge appreciation for the fact that we're here in America. I was privileged to travel the world with President Bush, and I got to go to a lot of places where people would do anything to get to live in America.
Yeah.
And I just feel a special obligation to remind people here of that and to help people elsewhere to try to be their most fulfilled selves. My husband and I do a lot of work together in Africa, and that's just brought us very close and is super rewarding as well.
Yeah. So while I was digging around, looking for recent media on you and just kind of getting a picture where you are right now, I stumbled across this wonderful video of you and your husband talking about how you met. And I've just related to you so quickly because my husband, I know your husband's English, mine's Australian though, but like the accent, I was a done deal, the accent. And you mentioned something about him though, it may have been elsewhere, but you said he gets so excited about American, like he's very like patriotic for America. And I thought it was so cool. You said he gets kind of teary at 4th of July and stuff. And mine's the same. He just got officially, he's a citizen now. And and so, he's got his little flag, and it's just, I wanted to hear if you could share a bit about that story, how you met, because it is just priceless. And I like
I just love seeing really successful women too, with a successful, supportive, amazing partner, because it's still hard to find sometimes. And, though some of us have been lucky to find that, but there's some women who may haven't, that may have not. So
yeah, there's a lot of women that haven't. And it sometimes, especially here in New York, it breaks my heart. My favorite piece, I'm going to save that until the end of the podcast, my pieces of advice. But Peter and I met on an airplane. We were assigned seats next to each other going from Denver to Chicago. And then I was going on to DC from there. And I hadn't had a date in so long. And he asked me if he could put my bag up above. And I said no, because I'm only 5 feet tall and my feet don't reach the floor of the airplane. So I like to put my feet on my bag.
Oh, it's like a footrest.
Yeah, exactly. And he had a book with him, The Tailor of Panama by John Le Carre. And I love books. So I just asked him about the book, and then that accent, oh my gosh. But my whole time I was like looking out the window every once in a while thinking, oh my gosh, I know I asked you to help me find somebody, Lord, but he's 18 years older than me. He lives in England. He could be an axe murderer. I've been married before. I mean, did I mention he lives in England? And this is just ridiculous. But I just felt myself falling in love in that 2 hours. And he felt the same. And I moved to England 6 months later.
You moved there first.
I moved there for a year or so. And then I have to say that I was like, this doesn't work for me. I need capitalism and America.
Y'all are really nice, and I like the tea, but it's too cold.
It's cold, and there's so many rules. So
they love rules. They love their rules. Yeah.
So we headed back here, and Peter is such an American patriot. Actually, it tells an interesting story. When we first moved, we went to San Diego because we thought that's where we'd want to live. Mm-hmm. And we start to get ourselves situated, and neither of us had jobs. He was going to start a business. I was going to look for a job. We had a 1-bedroom apartment and our puppy, Henry, that we brought from England. And Peter went, remember the car Auto Trader magazine?
Yeah.
In the old fashioned way of how you found a car. So there was a used Ford Explorer being sold. So we drove to the place to go and ask. And I stayed in the car with the puppy. And Peter went upstairs. When he came downstairs, I said, oh, how was it? And he goes, oh, well, he said something about it was a foreigner. He doesn't speak good English. And I said, you're a foreigner too. And he said that moment for him was so important. And he thinks about it a lot because America is such a special place. And then he became a citizen in 2006. And Brett Kavanaugh, who I was friends, who's now a Supreme Court Justice, we were all friends from the White House. He had just been appointed to the appeals court. And we came out of the courtroom. And as the first person we saw was Brett Kavanaugh, who congratulated Peter on becoming an American. And yes, Peter does. He gets teary-eyed at all of the pomp and circumstance. He absolutely loves it. And when I finished reading the audiobook, I said, wow, there is a lot of Peter in this book. And I will tell you, if there's men listening to this, or if you're a young woman and you want your boyfriend or husband to read the book, I encourage it, because I would say that with women doing so well now, they need to be supported. And Peter has been the most amazing support system for me. And I could not have done any of this without him.
What did he say when you said, I'm going to go be deputy press secretary for Bush?
Well, the deputy press secretary, he was just so proud of me. Like, that was so great. And I was happy to be the deputy.
That was the first big thing, right? That was okay.
And then because it looked like I was, there wasn't a real way to move up, and there was another 18 months to go in the White House, and he and I wanted to spend more time together. I had made a very tough decision that I was going to leave the White House. And I went in that Monday morning preparing to tell Ed Gillespie that I wanted to talk to the president, that I was going to be moving on. And Ed said, oh, I need to talk to you too. Can you stay after the meeting? I said, sure. So communications meeting ended, and he said, Dana, can you stay? Sure. And I sat down, and Allie, I went to just blurt it out to get it off my chest.
Right.
And Ed said, do you mind if I go first? I said, no, go. That's fine. Go ahead. And I sat back, and he said, the president would like to make you the press secretary on Friday.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, wonderful. What do we need to get started? Yeah. And I never told Ed, and he didn't know that until I wrote my first book, that I had gone into work that day intending to resign.
You had the whole script. You were ready.
Yes. And I called Peter and I said, change of plan. And he could not have been more thrilled. Same with when I got the offer to come up to New York and do the 5. It was supposed to be temporary for 5 weeks. It was in the middle of the summer. I was like, oh, this place, Manhattan in the summer is the worst. And I called Peter and he was in South Korea on business. And I was sort of sour about it. And he said, congratulations. This is what you always wanted to do your whole life. And so he knew me so well and could get me to see past the anxiety of having to pack and get up here for 5 weeks. And 2 weeks into that temporary show, Peter said, oh, we're going to be moving to New York. And I said, no way. But
he knew.
We celebrate our 10th anniversary this July on the 5.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Do you like going on TV and just, it seems to me like a dream job. You get to go on TV and tell people your opinion. Like I would, I've done it a few times. I was on Cavuto a few times, like years ago, but like, I just think it's so fun.
Sounds to me like we need to have you on the shows more.
I came and talked about a lot of small business issues, which I think still this year, I don't think it's been discussed enough. It's really interesting.
Especially because now they can't even find workers.
Yeah, that's a whole other show we'll do.
But I didn't initially I loved coming on TV to talk about what other people thought. Like I could tell you what President Bush thought, but I was not comfortable giving my own opinion, not for a long time.
Yeah.
Until I realized that I could actually make a living and I wasn't going to get fired. And that my opinion was valuable based on my experiences. And so, yeah, I do love it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So tell us anything else you'd like us to know about the book, about your career. And then I'd love to wrap up with 3 great pieces of advice. That could be all in one if you'd like.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity to talk about Everything Will Be Okay. I just really believe it is the right book at the right time for young people, and maybe not even all the young people. I think managers can learn from this too, as can partners or husbands. Because one thing I would say is, Allie, that young women that are climbing the ladder, there are going to be periods in their life where they have to work weekends or evenings, and they're going to be really busy. And the worst thing you can do if you're a supporter of theirs is to tell them something like, you're married to your job. You'll never find anybody. And instead, just be supportive of them in what they need at the moment. Maybe offer to bring them dinner or something, because they're not going to have that kind of schedule all the time, but they need support while they're climbing the ladder. And work-life balance is something that I think people should think about over the course of their lifetime, rather than just over a course of a week. That's a really good point, because people don't realize there's different chapters. There's different cycles. Absolutely. So my 3 pieces of advice. Okay. One, this is one that I've been talked about for a long time, partly because of my experience, but I would say don't be afraid to move locations, because that's how you grow and you meet people. And it's good to get uncomfortable and to get lost a little bit and to have to figure out the new subway system or to make new friends. And there's, especially where I come from, there's a lot of pressure to stay in the area, right? And I would say home is someplace they will always take you back, but go and see a little bit of this great world if you can. Yeah, life-changing. Definitely. The other thing is, I would recommend, how many pieces of advice can I roll into this one? But let me think. It's learn to get comfortable with discipline, self-discipline. I believe that there is so much more freedom in discipline than people realize. That don't think of discipline as a constraint, but as something that will actually help you manage your life. Explain better. That. So, for example, I get up at 4:30 every day so I can do my job, right? I have to be disciplined and go to bed between 9 and 9:30 every night, even if that show is so good and you want to watch another 20 minutes. Be disciplined, turn it off. When it comes to time management or nutrition in particular, your well-being is something that you are in charge of. And for me, that means that I have to have enough time to burn off stress and calories, to do some meditation, and to have some of that white space on my calendar. Also, you could have discipline where you say, like, I only will go to one work-related evening event a week. Here in Manhattan, you could go to something every night. Right. One of the best things about the pandemic was that I had to say, clear my calendar. And there were no consequences from that. So I have to be disciplined as we get back to not just work, but fun and entertainment and networking dinners that I have to be disciplined and be willing to say no.
Yeah.
When I need to. But my third and most important favorite piece of advice is something we've touched on a little bit, but I really want people to take this home. Choosing to be loved is not a career limiting decision.
Oh my gosh, that makes me want to cry. That's beautiful.
Because how many people do you know that say they put off dating or marriage or commitment because they really want to get their career set before they do? If you wait until you think that magical time in your mid-30s when you're going to meet the perfect guy and then you're going to have the perfect children, then it might not ever happen. And if a love opportunity is right there for you, choose that. And the career will all work out.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for being everything I thought you would be.
Thank you. I feel like you're my new best friend.
I love this. I would love to meet you in person one day, should the circumstances allow. Dana, this was fantastic. Everyone, you got to go pick up the book. And remember, everything will be okay. Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Glambition Radio. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe so you automatically get my new shows every week. Also, I'd love if you left us a review so more women like you can discover us. We're on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, and other major platforms. And I'd love to hear from you personally. Come join the conversation on social. Instagram is my happy place lately, and that's Allie Brown Official, but you can find links to my other platforms at alliebrown.com. Glambition Radio is the elevated conversation for women leaders, and I'm honored you tuned in.